Hi, I want to talk to you a little bit today about tissues. So tissues are kind of cool because this is the basic building blocks of an organism. So if you want to build something like this is a cicadelid, a very cute little insect, or whatever that is, right? That's actually a tunicate, which is a relative of the vertebrates. But if you wanted to build this, or even this, okay, which is absolutely adorable, you're going to have to start with something more akin to this, cartilage. Okay, a lot of things are going to have cartilage. Even if they don't have bones, they may have some cartilage in them. Or something like this, whatever that is, or this, whatever that is. But basically, you've got to start with the building blocks, okay? In this case, whatever that is columnar epithelial tissue. So epithelia tends to line things, it tends to cover things, and you can tell this is columnar because it's really longer than it is wide, just like a column. That big blob in the middle is that not all the cells have, but some of the cells have. That's probably some sort of a secretory vesicle. And you can tell on this one that, look at all the nuclei. You can just see where they are. Those are those real dark spots. But that's one of the things you kind of start with. Let's see, what else have we got here in terms of this? This is cartilage. And what are you looking at? Here are the cells, okay? Yeah, little cells everywhere. But there's a lot of stuff in between that's not cellular. That non-cellular stuff is going to be the hallmark of a connective tissue. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the four major kinds of tissues: the connective tissue, the epithelial tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. The first one I want you to think about here, the very first type of tissue is epithelia. Epithelia is kind of defined as being covering things or secreting things. That's the main jobs that epithelia do. And also epithelia tends to have a lot of cells, mainly cellular, and it falls into three major kinds. Squamous, which is a very fancy Latin way of saying squished; cuboidal, cubes, or columnars, taller than it is wide. So once we've got those three kinds, they can either come as stratified, meaning multiple layers, or simple, a single layer. So let's take a quick peek at some of these types of cells. Now, why are we doing this? Because when we start looking at stuff under the microscope, even though we're looking at mammalian cells now, all these other critters are basically made of the same tissues once you get beyond a sponge and an anemone. Most of the stuff we're going to be looking at through the semester is going to be made of these same kinds of tissues. So we're going to start out with the epithelial tissues. And this would be a diagram for a single layered squamous cell, squished cell. So it's much wider than it is tall, just like a pancake. And these cells tend to be often are kind of irregular. They fit together kind of like bricks on a wall for strength, because they're very thin. So a simple layer is going to be very, very thin, okay, just very, very thin, and it's often used for filtering things. So a good example of a filter might be in the lungs. When you want strength, just like you'd have a brick wall with lots of little bricks, things like your skin that need a lot of strength often have layer upon layer of squamous cells added. Now, when you look at a layer of squamous cells, it's going to look something like this. Now, I look at that, there's no way I could know just by looking, is this a columnar, or, I'm sorry, is this a simple or a stratified, because I can't see down below. This actually is an example of simple epithelia, simple squamous cells, and the only reason I know that is because I looked at the slide. Okay, now if it instead of a single layer of squamous cells, okay, which it might be something like the lung, and here are simple squamous cells in the lung. When we look in cross section, you can see how much different they look. Don't worry about this. This is basically the little tubes leading into the lungs. But look at how thin this is. It's 1 cell thick, and that's so that you can have easy diffusion of gases across that membrane. Now compare that to something more like the skin, okay? And we see that this is extremely thick, okay? This is what's called the basement layer, okay, or this very first layer. This is the one that gives rise to everything above it. So if you've ever heard the term of basal cell carcinoma, okay, that's a cancer that gets into the basal cells that produces all these other layers. So these are your basal cells. They are squamous. Therefore, this is a stratified squamous type of epithelium. Now, another type of epithelia, again, we saw the ones in the lungs, right? Let's take another look at at a simple tissue, but this time a simple cuboidal. Remember, cuboidals look like little marshmallows. They're about as big as they are wide. And this is a simple cuboidal from a kidney. And as you look at it, one of the things you can see as you move across it is that there's a lot of these little nuclei just about everywhere you look. Little nuclei, they're all kind of lining up. They're forming these little tubes. So the kidneys consist of a lot of little tubes, okay, other stuff too, but there's a lot of tubes in the kidneys that are used for the exchange and the treatment of fluids. Plus it's going to help reabsorb, and it's going to change the chemistry of the fluid, which is going to be the filtrate, which is going to become eventually which is going to get reabsorbed, but what we get rid of is going to become urine. But in this particular tube right here, if you look at it, you can really see the cuboidal structure, okay? This is very clear. Now, why isn't it as clear here as it might be in one of these other tubes? That's because when you cut at an angle, okay, you're going to change the geometry of what you're looking at. So it's going to make a big, big difference in what you see. So it's going to take some getting accustomed to know a cuboidal cell versus a columnar cell, because sometimes we just get them at the wrong angle, and we get them at a skewed angle, and we see something we're not expecting to see. So you're looking for the overall flavor within a tissue. And this is very definitely a cuboidal feel to it. Okay, so in addition to the cuboidal cells, we have these kinds of cells. And these are columnar. And if you look at the columnar cells, and these are the nuclei, these dark spots down here, and these are very tall cells. They go, here's the basement layer, basically what they call the basement membrane, which is a thin, non-cellular layer at the bottom of all the epithelial tissues. So from that basement membrane up is a single cell. And sometimes they look like they're multiple layers. We call that pseudostratified. Very, very few tissues are actually stratified columnar. When you do get them, that basal layer is going to be kind of weird, okay? We're not going to even worry about stratified columnars. I just want you to kind of look at and be able to say, hey, that's columnar tissue if you see it. And it's going to help you when you start looking at tissues under the scope. When we're looking at them, you don't want to have to sit there every time and go, okay, what is this? Is this a epithelial tissue? Is this a muscle tissue? So I want you to get a kind of a feel for it. And this is definitely columnar epithelia. Okay, so we've looked at the major types of epithelia now. Remember, we have simple, and then if we just build it up, we'll have stratified. This is pretty much what a squamous is going to look like under the scope. If you get it in a nice layered section. But it can also look like this under the scope if you have simple, if you're looking at it cut right through the tissue. This was, can you remember? Stratified squamous, okay. And this was what? Anybody? Cuboidal. Good. So these are the cuboidal cells. Now notice there's other stuff going on a slide. Animals never read the rule book. They don't know they're supposed to produce pure specimens of different kinds of tissues for you. So you'll always be looking at a hodgepodge of tissues that are building up organs. Okay. Very seldom are you going to get one and only one kind of tissue on a slide. These were simple cuboidal and columnar.